Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 6 preview and we're going to discuss things such as, are Salah and Alvarez essential in FPL at the moment? Who are the best forwards to own in FPL at the moment? And should we sell the likes of Jackson? And also, who should we be investing in from the Newcastle defence? If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, or if you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. We are trying to hit 100,000 subscribers before the end of September. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I thought it would be a really nice way to start this video by looking at the total XGI over game weeks 1 to 5 for the top 20 players in the Premier League. And by doing that, getting a bit of an idea about which players are getting chances to score goals and to create as well. So expected goal involvement is simply expected goals plus expected assists, as well as just giving us a bit of a recap over the first 5 game weeks. I thought this would be good to do because there have been quite a lot of comments around XG recently, specifically in relation to the likes of a Jackson, who has very, very good XG, but hasn't necessarily been converting that. And the reason I wanted to address it this week is I feel like there's always been a very healthy back and forth between content creators that like to use data, and I am one of them, and people that watch that don't necessarily think that XG is the best measure. They say things like football is played on grass, and it doesn't matter what the XG number is, points are what we're trying to get, and if a player is converting, I don't really care what their XG is. And I feel like that has always been very healthy, and there are pros and cons to using data, and I would never advocate just using data, and I myself know the flaws of expected goals and expected assists and all of this underlying data. But specifically in game week 5, I think because it was such a low scoring week and because a lot of people have had rough starts to the season along with content creators. I mean, I have not had a good start to the season, and I'll hold my hands up because I've struggled. But I feel like this week in particular, some of the comments, and it's a very small proportion, have actually become abusive to the point in relation to XG and underlying data and can't seem to wrap their head around why we use it. So very, very briefly, why do I use underlying data and XG and things like that? The reason for it is I need to sit here every week and justify why I'm recommending players to bring in and to take out. If I simply sit here and go, well, I watch match of the day and in the 5 minutes of highlights, I think that this player looks great. I mean, how are you supposed to trust my eye test? How are you supposed to trust that I understand football well enough to recommend a player? So what we do instead is we try to look at objective stats and objective data. And I suppose you could say instead, we'll just use things such as points, use things such as goals and assists that players have actually got. Look at actual output. And to that, I would say, well, what's the point in me being here, really? Because if it's just points you're looking at, and if it's just goals and it's just assists, then there is literally no point in me being here apart from for entertainment, because you can simply just look at that stuff yourself. I feel like where myself in particular is quite useful, and other content creators too, is in our interpretation and understanding of data, specifically in relation to underlying data such as expected goals, because it's not just as simple as looking at the data and picking a player based on that. You do need to interpret the data, you need to change the sample size if you want to, you need to understand the context in and around that, and then apply that in relation to eye test, into actual output, touch maps, tactics, fixtures. So this is where I feel like our value is. Really, XG, it's got such a dirty connotation for a lot of people, but all it is giving us a bit of an idea about, is that player getting chances to score goals? Because the number that we value to a shot, let's say we value a shot at 0.6 XG. That is simply saying that 60% of the time we would expect that player to score that goal. So people immediately see XG and they click off a video, or they skip. You may well have skipped at this point. I guess if you're watching this, you wouldn't have skipped, but there we go. A 0.6, like I said, means 6% of the time we would expect that player to score the goal. I like that because it allows me to point to that and say, no subjectivity here, no bias from me. That player is getting chances to score goals, or that player is getting a chance to create goals as well. So all it does for me is it just gives me an objective measure of whether these players are getting in the positions to score goals and to create. Because at the end of the day, that is, in my opinion, the best predictor, along with fixtures, of whether a player will continue to. If a player is consistently getting in the best positions and they are getting chances to score goals, most of the time, and not all of the time, most of the time, they will start to finish those. So that is why I will continue to use data on this channel. And again, if you don't like that, then you may well be on the wrong channel. I don't over-rely on it. But I do think that specifically in Game Week 5, it's just got to the point where the comments are so negative, and I'm almost getting to the stage where I feel like we can't have a coherent conversation with a lot of people because they just immediately dismiss anything that discusses underlying data. So sorry about that little bit of a rant there at the start, especially if you are someone that's very positive and you are someone that uses data. Hopefully that does make it clear why I use it on this channel and why I will continue to as well. And with that in mind, like I said, I've got the total XGI, which is expected goals plus expected assists, expected goal involvement from game weeks 1 to 5. So the players with the highest XGI, the ones that are getting the most chances to score goals and are creating the most chances as well in combination. And as you would always expect, Haaland is at the top at 8.4, and then Salah's at 6.1. And we're going to discuss Salah in more detail later in the video, so I won't do it here. But this is what you would expect to see throughout the season. Haaland is in a league of his own and will continue to be. Salah is then the next step down, and then there is another step down to the rest of the players. And we know that Salah is going to be that good, and we will discuss him later on. But this does just say that Salah does tend to split Haaland and then the rest of the humans in the Premier League. After that, you can understand why a lot of content creators, myself included, have been so patient with the likes of Fernandes, Jackson, Mbeumo to some extent in recent weeks too. Maddison, even though he hasn't performed necessarily in the last couple particularly well. But Fernandes and Jackson in particular are two players that, again, I'm getting a lot of frustrated viewers watching the channel saying, why on earth do you still have Fernandes? Why aren't you selling Jackson? This is the reason. They have the third and fourth best data in the league. And I'll go back to the idea of XG. Yes, Jackson is not finishing his chances. And this is where XG fails slightly. And this is where I need to take that into account. And I will, I promise you this week, look at it and say, if Jackson is not going to finish the chances, if he's not confident, if he doesn't look like he's adapting to the Premier League and he doesn't look like he will finish the chances he's getting, then XG can only take you so far. And I will admit this week that I'm very, very tempted to sell Jackson for Alvarez, who we will discuss later. But this is just to explain why we have been so patient. The reason I'm holding on to the likes of Fernandes and Jackson is because their data has been so good. We've also got, like I said, got Maddison there performing very, very well, as is Mbeumo. I'm not going to discuss the forwards in tons of detail because I'm actually going to discuss the forwards later on in the video. But Edouard is popping up as a player that I'm very interested in, and we'll discuss him later because I'm actually very tempted to bring him in ahead of the likes of a Morris or even maybe an Alvarez because I really like what I'm seeing there. Saka and Rashford also performing fairly well. You could definitely justify holding on to them. I know a lot of people sold Saka and Rashford for Son in game week 5, and there was justification to do so, but they are two players that continue to put up very, very decent data. I'd just like to discuss Diaby in here as well. He's the man on your screen, as you can see, putting up very good data for his price. The fixtures haven't been that great for Aston Villa. And you have to remember, these have been his first few games in the Premier League. So as he begins to adapt a little bit more, if Villa can do better in the fixtures that they've got coming up, because from game week 8 onwards, Villa's fixtures are exceptionally good, I really, truly do believe that Diaby will be one of the best value assets in the game this season, and I cannot wait to get him in my team. We've also got Matoma and Ferguson of Brighton coming in there. We know how good Brighton are at creating chances. Matoma's been slightly underwhelming, but he has still got attacking returns. And if you own him against Bournemouth in game week 6, I think you've got to hang on to Matoma, as you probably do with Ferguson. One more player that I just wanted to draw your attention to is Pedro Neto with 3.1 expected goal involvement total over the opening 5 game weeks. He's been creating a hell of a lot of chances. One of the most creative players in the league. And in game week 6, Wolves play against Luton. So if you are looking for a cheeky 1-week punt, maybe because you're on a wildcard, or if you're considering wildcarding in 7 or 8, and you just want a 1-week punt, Neto could be a decent shout because Wolves are creating the chances. And if in a single game week, Wolves actually can manage to even convert like 10% of their chances, they could score 2, 3, 4 goals. So I really like the look of Neto, and I thought he was incredibly impressive in game week 5 too. So that's just a bit of insight into the players that have been performing well from an underlying perspective. Basically, who is getting the chance to score goals and create goals too. And hopefully that now allows you to understand, if you are on the fence around why I discuss underlying data, it's not because I don't watch football. It's not because I think the eye test is silly. I watch so much football and I do trust my own eyes as well. It just gives us an objective measure around the players that are getting the chances to score goals and create goals. And it allows me to justify why I'm suggesting picking certain players and why I'm suggesting selling certain players as well. So we will leave that discussion there. As I said, if you do want to get access to any of this underlying data, you can click the link in the description for 30% off at Fantasy Football Hub now. So we are going to move straight on to Salah because it's definitely worth discussing. A lot of us at the start of the season, for the first time in recent years and in my memory really, such a large percentage went for a 1 premium draft where we just went for Haaland and no other premiums. The reason for that was there were doubts around whether Kane would stay in the league, and of course he didn't end up staying in the league, and Salah just didn't seem at the time like he was worth the 12.5 million when in almost every week, bar maybe game week 2, it looked like we would be captaining Haaland. However, Salah has proved that he is the consistent asset that we know he is, and he's actually one of the top point scorers in the Premier League over the opening 5 game weeks. So we need to discuss whether we should be bringing him back in, especially as from around game week 8, game week 9 onwards, there is a really decent fixture swing for Liverpool. And there's also a fixture swing in the other direction for Man City. And the reason I think that's so important is because, as I've always said, I think the real value in a premium asset, the real reason that you spend 12 plus million on an asset is so that you can captain them. Because if you're not captaining them and you think someone like an 8 or 7 million pound asset can get close to the likes of a Salah, then why would you pay 5 million? Yes, for a few extra points, but is it not maybe better to just spread that money a little bit more? But when captaincy comes into account, when you're getting 2 of that player's points, it all of a sudden feels very worth it. And if Haaland's fixtures are going to get slightly difficult, and in game week 5, he struggled to finish some of his chances. I'm recording this immediately after the Man City game in the Champions League, and once again, he wasn't necessarily finishing his chances. We know that Haaland's not great away from home. We know that Haaland does struggle a little bit, especially away from home against the top 6. Salah could seriously be a captain option a lot of the upcoming game week, so we probably are going to want him unless something drastically changes from game week 9 onwards. But do we bring him in now? Do we also want him for West Ham, Tottenham, Brighton, maybe Everton? Because these aren't difficult fixtures from a defensive perspective. West Ham are still conceding chances. Spurs are attacking very well, but they're conceding chances too. Brighton have not been a good defence. We know that Everton at home and Forest at home are really good fixtures for Salah as well. So I'm looking at the next 5 game weeks, and you probably could do with having Salah in when we're just looking at the fixtures. Let's discuss the data, though. Is Salah worth the £12.5 million price tag? I would argue he probably is based on what we've seen in the Premier League so far this season. He's getting enough minutes. He's starting every game. That's one of the benefits of Salah, is that he is absolutely nailed to start almost every game in the Premier League. He's on penalties as well, and he tends to get 90 minutes a lot of the time. So you can see, over the opening 5, he's averaged 86 minutes per game, and the stats have been exceptionally strong. We're looking at a 7.91 expected FPL points per 90, 0.45 non-penalty expected goals. So one of the criticisms that a lot of people, myself included, have thrown at Salah recently is that, yes, he's looked very good, and yes, he's creating a lot of chances, but his goal threat doesn't seem as good as it used to. And whilst this is a bit of a reduction in his goal threat in comparison to what we've seen in previous seasons, 0.45 non-penalty expected goals is nothing to turn your nose up at. That is still getting around 1 XG every 2 games. So he's still getting the chances to score goals, even if it isn't necessarily as high as what we've seen in the past. But what we are seeing from Salah is an increased creative threat. He's getting a 0.66 expected assist per 90, which is up there almost beyond the likes of what we've seen from Kevin De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes in recent seasons. So Salah is a serious creative threat, and we saw that once again in game week 5, the amount of chances he creates. So he's putting up over 1 expected goal involvement per 90. He's getting over 2 big chances per 92. This is a pretty simple one, yes. Get Salah into your teams if you can get him in your teams. I suppose the more difficult question is, do you need to do it now, right? So let's say that a lot of us are maybe planning a wildcard in game week 9 or game week 10, or maybe you're just thinking, I'll save up 2 free transfers and I'll make the move in game week 9, because Everton at home, I would say, is the start of the really nice fixture run, and that's probably when Man City's fixtures start to really turn for the worse as well. So I think most people will be eyeing up Salah in game week 9, but should you do it for the next 3 weeks? Again, if there is a simple way to get him into your team, I would argue yes. I think it's a relatively straightforward move to make, because he is probably the best midfield asset at the moment in the game. And whilst no, I still don't know that if you're not looking to captain him very often, he's probably not worth 12.5 million. I almost feel like that discussion is slightly moot at the moment, because we don't really need the money. A lot of us are sitting there with 2 or 3 million in the bank. A lot of us are sitting there with maybe a slightly stronger bench, or a couple of midfielders that we don't mind downgrading. Maybe you've got like Rashford, Sterling, Son, Fernandes, and then some other asset, maybe like a Foden, and you're looking at your midfield and thinking, I'd happily lose 2 or 3 of those, maybe take a -4, use 2 free transfers, downgrade one to a really cheap asset around sort of 5.5 to 6 million, and then bring in Salah for the other one, and I've got some money in the bank as well. Maybe it doesn't matter that he's 12.5 million, because the way that the budget has gone this season, the way that the players are priced, a lot of us have money in the bank anyway. So if you were sitting here expecting me to say that Salah's not a good option, I'm not going to do it, because the data's too good. The fixtures are good coming up. He's a 90-minute man on penalties. There's very, very little to dislike about Salah. I suppose my major concern with bringing in Salah now is that I am actually happy with a few of my midfielders, and even the ones that I'm not happy with. Like, I'm not particularly happy with Bruno Fernandes, Rashford, and Sterling. They are 3 players that I'm not overly happy with. I feel like Sterling has been quite unlucky in recent weeks. Bruno Fernandes' data is great and he's on penalties. But on top of that, Rashford and Fernandes played Burnley away. And I know Man United have been so disappointing, especially in the last couple. Bruno Fernandes has dipped a little bit. But I don't know if that's just an emotional response in response to the frustration of how these assets have been. Would I rationally and logically recommend taking out 2 assets with good data against Burnley away? I don't know that I can justify doing so. And it's a similar situation with Sterling. I'm not going to remove Mbeumo before Everton, and I've just brought Heung-min Son in. So I look at it and think, yeah, I could try and squeeze Salah in, and I do think Salah's the best midfielder. But is it worth breaking my team when they've got decent fixtures this week to get Salah in? When whilst the next 3 aren't bad, they're certainly not the best fixtures. And where you really want Salah is around game week 9, game week 10. So all of that to say, if I had an easy route to Salah, let's say I had 3 or 4 million in the bank and a couple of players I wouldn't mind selling, then I would probably get him this week. And if you've got 2 free transfers, it might offer a nice opportunity to still get on Salah when his ownership isn't sky high. Because if he continues performing like this and continues to get returns, around game week 9, Salah's ownership's going to be up close to 80 to 90%. So now's the time to get him in if you want him as a differential. I would love to know down below in the comments, what are you going to do? Unfortunately, at the moment, just due to the way my team's set up, I'm probably unlikely to do it for game week 6. So the next discussion is around Newcastle defenders and comparing Sven Botman, Kieran Trippier, and Fabian Schär. And what I've done is similar to what we did in the past with Sterling, Foden, Maddison, where I've kind of ranked them according to how I view them at the moment. So as you can see, at the moment, if I were to bring in one asset, it would be Sven Botman, closely followed by Kieran Trippier, closely followed by Fabian Schär. Now, I don't think any of these 3 are bad options. I think I would be perfectly happy if you decided to bring in any of these 3 assets. But I will try and discuss the nuances between them and why I currently have them ranked as Botman, Trippier, Fabian Schär in that order. Firstly, the fixtures are absolutely outrageous. And yes, I do believe that it's still worth investing in the Newcastle defence. You can see Sheffield United, Burnley, West Ham, Palace, Wolves over the next 5. Whether you're looking to wildcard soon or in the future, Newcastle's fixtures look good from now until game week 19. And actually, if you look at the spell from game week 12, 13-ish to game week 19, Newcastle have the best fixtures in the league. So it's not just the next 5 weeks. It's actually the next kind of 15, 16 weeks. So it's definitely worth bringing them in my opinion. And I am looking to get the double up in my team this week because I already own Botman, and I'm looking at probably bringing in Kieran Trippier. So why do I think Botman is the best asset? There's 2 reasons. Firstly, it is price. And I know at the moment it may feel like you don't need that money, but there is a good chance that you do. And even if you are looking to wildcard soon, if you buy Botman now and he starts to rise in price, you can keep him in your team at the price that you bought him, of course. And I just think that 2 million between Botman and Trippier, I would need to see a hell of a lot more from Trippier and a hell of a lot less from Botman to justify the 2 million if I was only selecting one at the moment. And so price is important. Regardless of if you have money in the bank now or not, price will always be important for me. The second reason is, as I said, Botman is showing a hell of a lot at the moment. So whilst his XG hasn't been great, he's only put up 0.01 XG per 90 over the opening 5, his expected assist is sat at 0.22. He's created, I think, 2 big chances so far in the league. And whilst it is a very, very small sample size, that is a reasonable amount of expected assists. It's more than Kieran Trippier. So I wouldn't expect Botman to get anything close to Trippier's stats across the season. But this is just to say Botman isn't creating nothing. He's not sort of void of attacking returns. So I look at this and think you're actually getting better data thus far with a very small sample size for much, much cheaper. And he's also been very, very good for bonus points in the games that he's played so far this season. If that continues, Botman is good for bonus points, creating chances. He's a bit of a goal threat from corners, and he's the cheapest defender that you can get that is going to start on a regular basis. So for me, Sven Botman just makes too much sense. And if I was, I already own Sven Botman. I've owned him since game week 1. But if I was choosing from scratch, I still think I would recommend Sven Botman. The reason that Kieran Trippier is in second ahead of Fabian Schär is more just we know how good he is. And yes, his data is only 0.16 expected assist, and he's got no goal threat so far this season. But he is still on every set piece. He is an exceptionally talented fullback. I did watch some of the game in the Champions League against AC Milan, and whilst Newcastle were for large spells absolutely battered by AC Milan, Kieran Trippier played an absolutely brilliant game. And yes, there is a small chance that Kieran Trippier is rotated with the upcoming games that they've got. They've obviously got another game against PSG coming up. They've got the game against Man City in the Cup. They've got obviously Premier League games every weekend too. Whilst there is a chance that he's rotated or rested in one of those games, I think it's probably worth the risk because, like I said, he is on all set pieces. He's brilliant at taking free kicks. He's brilliant with his open play crossing too. And I would expect with the fixtures starting to ease up, Kieran Trippier's data to just rise a little bit. And I just think he's going to be worth probably paying slightly more than, 1.5 million more than Fabian Schär. But it is probably a close one because, again, even that 1.5 million, less of a gap between Trippier and Schär than there is between Trippier and Botman. But that still does go a long way. So just about edging Fabian Schär at the moment because I'm looking to bring in one of Trippier or Schär. And at the moment, I'm just about leaning towards Kieran Trippier just because he is the sort of player that you can get maybe 2 or 3 assists in a 5-game week spell. Whereas Fabian Schär, he has a goal in him, but I don't know that you're expecting multiple attacking returns over the short term. So that's the reason that Kieran Trippier is in second. And also on top of that, Fabian Schär thus far this season hasn't really demonstrated any threat of any kind. You can see 0.04 expected goal involvement. So he's not really shown that goal threat this season. He's not really shown that assist threat. And also he hasn't been fantastic for bonus points, although he did pick up obviously 1 bonus point in game week 5. But Kieran Trippier and Botman both picked up more. So at the moment, that is my ranking of them. Definitely Botman for me. I just think he's so good value. It's why I started the season with him. I still think in general that Newcastle are a defence worth investing in. They're currently still looking good for expected goals conceded, despite having pretty tricky fixtures over the first 4. And from now, the fixtures get so good. You can see 2 really nice home fixtures against Burnley and Palace, and the away fixtures aren't bad either. I would invest in at least 1 Newcastle asset. I don't mind the double up. And if I am to double up, it's Botman and it's Trippier. So guys, something else that I thought was worth discussing is the forwards in FPL at the moment. I was going to do specific sections on Morris and Alvarez and would I sell Jackson. I thought, do you know what? The best thing to probably do is to put them all in a table, have a discussion around some of the key ones and let you look at the stats whilst I'm talking if you are interested. I just highlighted a few players that I do want to talk about in this video in particular with just a little blue star next to their name. So all that means is they're just a player that I just want to have a little bit of a chat around. We'll start with Morris. I'm more on board with Morris than I was just because I think there's a bit of double game week fever. As I say, I'm a bit of a sucker for a double. And when you look at Morris's fixtures in that double, it may well be worth going there. So if you are looking for a £5.5 million-ish forward, let's say you are maybe looking to sell João Pedro in game week 7 or game week 8, or specifically for game week 7 for the double, I don't hate the idea of Morris. You can see, due to the extra fixture, he's got some of the highest projected points from game week 6 to game week 10. My main issue with Morris, because he's a penalty taker, getting 90 minutes per game with a really nice double, it's just Luton. I'm not expecting Luton to create a lot of chances to score goals. And you can see here that his non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 over the opening 5 game weeks is 0.22. So across the entirety of the opening 5 games, he's only just accumulated over 1 expected goal involvement. So yes, it's a really nice double, but that doesn't suddenly make him a fantastic asset. So I'm still not fully on board with Morris. At the moment, I'm actually tempted to probably avoid Morris for the double and just hope that my single game week players do well. But I just wanted to say, if you want to go for it, I understand it. I love the double game, which you get 2 goes, obviously, rather than 1. He is on penalties. All he needs is 1 or 2 penalties plus 1 assist where he just knocks it to someone and they score an absolute screamer. Like, this is what you like about 2 games, is that they don't even necessarily need to play well, especially when they're a penalty taker. They could still get you a really decent return. So I don't mind him at all. But the player that is tempting me a hell of a lot more at a very similar price is Edouard, someone that's probably going under the radar massively. Look at that data, 0.81 non-penalty expected goal involvement. Got the 4th best fixtures in the league from game week 6 to 10, according to Fantasy Football Hub. We need to start considering Edouard, and Crystal Palace actually don't look too bad so far this season. They've had a bit of a mixed bag with respect to fixtures, but the fixtures are starting to improve now. Edouard is getting serious minutes. He's got 429 minutes so far this season, which is one of the highest on the list out of all of these forwards. I think he deserves considering. And for me, if I was looking at a cheaper striker at the moment, which I'm not necessarily needing, Edouard could be the one for me. So I just think that he's definitely someone that's worth considering with the fixture that they've got. Maybe back against Morris, maybe back against the double, and bringing a player that is putting up almost 4 times the expected goal involvement that Morris is. I really do like the look of Edouard. Wissa's maybe decreased slightly his data in comparison to in the opening couple. I mean, his data looks so good. Recently, that's dropped up to a little bit, but Wissa's still got decent data, as has Awoniyi. Ferguson's data is exceptionally strong, but he's not played enough minutes, so it's maybe slightly skewed there. But when Ferguson plays, Ferguson's outrageously good. And he's got Bournemouth this week, so if you think Ferguson's minutes are going to be good enough, I like him as an option. Alvarez. Next one we need to discuss is, of course, Julian Alvarez. What's his data looking like? I mean, it's good. It really is. 0.63 non-penalty expected goal involvement is good. But as you can see, it's the same as Wissa. It's slightly less than Awoniyi. It's less than Edouard. It's less than Jackson, Wilson, Watkins. It's not exceptional data. The issue with Alvarez is he is a very good finisher. And the players that he's creating chances for are also good finishers, especially when it's Erling Haaland or Phil Foden, but specifically Erling Haaland. So What Alvarez has done so far this season is he's performed very similarly to his XG. So I don't know what his actual XG total is, but let's say his total XG is like 3. He scored about 3 goals. So he's performed very, very similarly to his XG and his actual goal output. But what he has done is massively overperformed his expected assists. So this could be due to 2 reasons. A bit of luck, just in the fact that the chances that he's created, his teammates have taken very well. Or it could just highlight, as I said, that he is playing in a team where when he creates chances for them, they're very likely to score them. All of that to say, you would probably expect someone like Alvarez playing in that Man City attack to overperform his data. So maybe he doesn't need exceptional data. He just needs strong data. And due to the finisher that he is and due to the finishers around him, he will continue to overperform it. So, listen, I love Alvarez. I think he's an exceptional footballer. He played so well in the... I'm recording this after the Champions League game. He was absolutely brilliant. I love him. I'm going to not put you off at all. The fixtures aren't great longer term, but especially if you're planning a wildcard in game week 8, 9 or 10, Alvarez is definitely worth the punt. If you've already used your wildcard or you're looking a little bit longer term, maybe he's not as enticing. But I think really if you're planning that wildcard in those 3 game weeks, Alvarez is probably worth going for. And yes, it probably is worth selling Jackson for Alvarez, but I will just point to the fact that Jackson does have the better data. So he's got a 0.85 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So if you do trust the data, Jackson will continue to get chances. It's just whether you expect him to finish them. And I don't think there are many people that play FPL, watch football on a regular basis, that think that Jackson is going to start converting anytime soon. And this is where data is difficult, because at some point you have to make the decision and just say that you can't wait forever. Like, I can't just keep sitting here every week saying Jackson's got really good XG, he's going to start finishing. At some point I have to say, cut my losses and just say he's just not finishing the chances at the moment. And he doesn't look likely to either. I don't even think that he's been unlucky. I think he's just not finishing them well. He's got a real lack of composure. He's not linking up overly well with some of the other players in that Chelsea attack. So yeah, Jackson to Alvarez is probably a move worth making, and I would definitely consider it. And I am considering it myself this week as well. Darwin and Højlund, I've not got their data, as I haven't with, as you can see at the bottom, Gabriel Jesus. They've just not played enough minutes for me to even justify putting the data on there. You can see, I'd need at least like 170, 180 minutes to even consider putting their data on this table, because it's just not representative. You're looking at too small of a sample size. But Darwin and Jesus' data has always been good, and it will continue to be good. Højlund we've not really seen enough of at the moment, but I feel like Jesus could be a decent punt if you expect him to get enough minutes, but it looks like he's being eased in quite slowly. Darwin, we just don't know if he's nailed on enough on a consistent basis to justify having him at the moment. And Højlund, I just need to see more from that Manchester United attack before I consider picking him. And then outside of that, you've got the 2 Newcastle attackers, Isak and Wilson. I just don't know who's going to start in any given game. And I don't think it's as simple as Isak will get Champions League, Wilson will get Premier League. I think it will be a mix and match. I think they'll come off around 50, 60. I think sometimes they'll play together. Sometimes we'll have Isak off the left. Sometimes we'll have him through the middle. Sometimes Wilson will play in the Champions League. I don't think it's going to be easy enough to predict. And as a result, I think I will just avoid them both. But as we have always said, and I would expect this to continue to be the case for the foreseeable future, Wilson has the best data when they both play. You can see a 0.97 non-penalty expected goal involvement is the second best on this list after Ferguson. Wilson puts up some ridiculous numbers. So if you're looking at numbers, Wilson's the one, but I would expect Isak to continue to get slightly more minutes based on what we've seen so far this season. And then just to finish with Ollie Watkins, because a lot of people own Ollie Watkins and are maybe looking at the Watkins to Alvarez switch. I do think this one's a little bit trickier, because I think from game week 8, Ollie Watkins is an exceptionally strong asset to own in FPL. As we spoke about at the start of the video, the fixtures do really turn for Aston Villa around game week 8. And even over the next 5 game weeks, Aston Villa apparently have the 5th best fixtures in the league, according to Fantasy Football Hub. So I do like Watkins, and he's actually putting up some really strong data, the strongest data of his career, at a 0.72 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So there's a lot to like with Watkins. He has been, probably not to the level of Jackson, but he has been disappointed in that Diaby is continuing to get loads of attacking returns. Even the likes of Leon Bailey is as well. But Watkins just isn't getting enough returns to justify having him at 7.9 million. So whilst I don't necessarily think that he's a terrible option, would I be tempted to do Watkins to Alvarez as well? I probably would, and I don't necessarily mind that move. So that is a discussion around the forwards. The 2 that really stand out to me is Edouard at that cheaper price. I really do like him, and I would love to take a punt on him. And if I decide I don't want Alvarez, because this is an important note, actually. Man City are actually technically one of 3 early kickoffs on Saturday because there is no actual 12:30 kickoff. So there are 3 p.m. games, and Man City are one of those. So we should get early team news. Well, maybe we'll get early team news as to whether Alvarez starts. If Alvarez doesn't start, and I do still want to sell Jackson to Edouard could be... I genuinely do believe that he's a really, really good asset, Edouard, and I'm seriously considering myself. But the most likely move would be Jackson to Alvarez. I would love to know down below, are you considering bringing in Alvarez for Game Week 6, or are there some other options? Or are you going to keep faith with the likes of Jackson and Watkins, which I don't necessarily hate? Alvarez just looks too good to be true at the moment. His numbers are good, his minutes are good, he's passing the eye test. I think there are points in FPL when you just make the obvious transfer, and Alvarez feels like that. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 6 preview. If you have watched to this point and you are not yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing. Completely free for you to do. Takes 2 seconds, but it massively supports me. And we are trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of September, which looks optimistic, but hopefully we can get there. And if you have subscribed and you've not yet turned on notifications, please consider doing that as well. It's the little bell next to the subscribe button. It basically sends you a notification when I upload a video or when I go live, and it just allows you to get that content as soon as possible. Until next time, which will be tomorrow for my team selection, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.